us what you had for breakfast this morning.
What did I have? I had 2 eggs over easy and 2 pieces of rye toast.
Wait, no prunes?
Prunes. That came first. The fruit was first, prunes and whatever else.
I like rye toast. Is that your favorite? You like sourdough or
Yes.
wheat? You
Well,
like rye.
this is kind of half rye. It's kind of circled, the rye and the wheat,
Oh, marbled rye.
marbled rye.
Yes.
Yum.
Okay.
No.
Yeah. How would you like to start?
Well, I'll start by saying hello to everybody. I feel like a movie star getting interviewed here, and I hope I do well. And when I get emotional, about things that touch me. But I thought, you probably think this goes back to the Dark Ages. I'm sure you think it was the Dark Ages. Well, it begins almost 100 years ago. But I lived in Sioux City. I was raised, probably lived about 18 years there. And it was a town of 90,000 people. We had a beautiful theater, the Orpheum, which had red velvet curtains and crystal chandeliers. And we went to the movies there. And also they had vaudeville. I don't know if any of you know about vaudeville. But it's live and it's performers that come from all over. And there were singers and dancers and magicians and dog tricks, all kinds of things. It was wonderful to see. So it wasn't the Dark Ages. And they had a symphony there in Sioux City. And of course in high school they had a great band. And I was a cheerleader for one of the sports teams. And so I'll start out with being born in Storm Lake, Iowa. And my mother was a nurse. And my father, I don't know much about him because he deserted us when I was 2. But I think he was a car salesman. And he was a Mormon, and he was one of 5 boys. And I never asked my mother, well, why did that happen? I always thought, well, it will hurt her to talk about it. So I don't know why he left, and we never heard from him again. So she took me to Sioux City, where her parents lived. My grandparents lived there, had a house there. So, starting out in Sioux City, it was a wonderful house, full of wonderful people. And it was the Depression, and nobody had any money. And so my mother got a job at a local osteopathic hospital, which Barbara became an osteopath. It was just a small hospital in the neighborhood. And she told me once, she earned $12 a week. She gave my grandmother $5 a week for room and board for the 2 of us. We slept together in the same bed till I got married, a double bed. And then, for some reason, she dropped nursing and became a telephone operator. And she had a little office we had 2 beautiful department stores in Sioux City. And she worked in one of those department stores. She had a little office, and she loved that. And and the house, my mother was the eldest, so she still had sisters and brothers at home. And her sister, one was Cecilia, a very funny lady, very outgoing, very funny, single, and she worked at Wind Charger. I remember that all of it, which is kind of a defense place. And then there was Eileen, her other sister. Now her other sister was schizophrenic, and she never had a job. She was just home. She was home all the time and helped around the house. No one thought anything of it. I grew up with her. And then there were the 3 uncles. Morris, who was the funniest person I've ever known. He was a natural wit like Bob Hope. Just natural, funny, and he always had jokes to tell. I could hardly wait for dinner. We sat down for dinner at 6 o'clock, and to hear this conversation. And I was very quiet. My mother was quiet. But Morris and Cecilia had a great time chatting and being funny. And we were also poor. You know, nobody had much. And I don't ever remember having a dollar bill. I had some change off and on. You know, I'd babysit and get 50 cents or something for the evening. But I never remember even having a bill. And the streetcar was close to us, about a block away. And it was like 20 cents. I didn't use the streetcar much because it cost 20 cents. And I started elementary school, and it was just a half a block from where we lived. And it was a very nice school. It was kind of a tan brick, a light brick color. It had a tennis court, it had a baseball field, it had swings. So I used to go over there a lot after school and use the facilities and swings and so forth. And
How was school for you?
school, it was easy. I mean, you know, moderate, but we had good teachers. Iowa has the reputation of being one of the best public schools, elementary and high school in the nation. Has a top reputation for education. And so anyhow, I went there for 6 years. Then I went to junior high, which was about a mile away. And on my way to school, there was a library, beautiful library. And one time I lost 2 books when I was maybe in junior high or something. And they said I couldn't check out any more books until I paid for those 2. Never had the money to pay for the 2 books. But I used to go there and sit down and read the books. But I couldn't check them out. And then we went this summer. There was about a half a mile away, a little ice cream stand. And what a treat to go to that in the summer and have an ice cream cone. We never ever had ice cream in our ice box. Of course, we had ice boxes where the iceman came every week and brought big pieces of ice. And he'd chip it off, and we'd follow him and pick up the chips and eat them and suck on them. And but as I say, it was simple. My grandmother was a good cook. Everything was very tasty. She'd always have meat, some kind of main dish, potatoes, and a vegetable. And I remember her ordering from the grocery store. She would call every day, and she said, I would like 8 pork chops, 8 potatoes, and a can of green beans. We never had salad. It's like one time. One salad she made, it was with cheese and beans, cheese and peas and mayonnaise. That was the salad we always had. And so anyhow, then they deliver them. The delivery boy on his bicycle would bring the groceries to the back door, and my grandmother would pay for them, and that's how. And so the food, I had a place, a roof over my head, good food, wonderful people, and no car. Nobody had a car there, except my uncle. When he left, he got a car. And so I walked every place. I mean, I didn't think, oh, it's just tough. It was just part of life. And when I went to high school, I walked 3 miles each way. And then when we went to Sioux City, David and Jim, they always said, oh, ha, 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 you walked 3 miles. So we measured it. We got in the car, and it was 3 miles each way. And Sioux City in the winter is worse than the East Coast. It's colder. It's really, so I had the long underwear on. And now you have book bags and all. I don't know how I carried all my books and my lunch, but I did the 3 miles back and forth. And I have to talk about my grandmother because she was really a character. She was the head one. She was the chief. And she was an Irish Catholic Democrat. And there were 2 things her kids had to do: go to church on Sunday and vote. And she went to the Democratic conventions. There was always the Democratic meetings she was going to, or having people to the house. And she got her husband, my grandfather, whom I call Papa, because I didn't have a father, he was my Papa. She got him a job through politics with the park department. I don't know what he did, but he worked for the park department. And also, we had a park just a couple blocks away with a swimming pool, free. And that was nice. That was run by the city. And then in the summer in that park, they'd show big screens with movies on the weekends. And that was always fun to go to. And that was our main recreation, was going to the movies and dancing. And let's see, continue with the house first. It was 2 stories. It had a parlor, a little entryway, a parlor, a small living room, a dining room, and a kitchen, and a pantry. That was the downstairs. Then there was a basement. And in the basement there were a couple burners, and that's where my grandmother heated the water to wash the clothes. She had a clothes washer, no dryer, and then she'd put everything out on the clothesline. And in the winter they'd all freeze, like the shirts were like this. And she did everything. And she was a great card player. She loved cards. And during the Depression, my uncles used to come back and forth, and I remember her at the dining room table playing cards with her sons. Euchre, all different kinds of things. And she loved cards. And my mother didn't know one card from the other. My mother was a reader, and she read books. She was real quiet, but she wasn't interested in politics. She wasn't interested in cards. And then my grandmother belonged to a little bridge group. There were 4 of them. And when one couldn't come, she'd ask me to play. And I was only 10 years old. And I learned how to play bridge. And then my whole life, I played bridge. And my best friends are bridge players. I've met them through bridge. So it's been a wonderful thing. Mm-hmm. And but she was a character, and you had to be in, at night at a certain time, not after midnight. So when I was in high school, now we lived in Sioux City, had the north side, which was the rich side with the doctors, the lawyers, the businessmen. The, what was our side called? The blue collar side, which was my family. And then the south side, which was the poor group. Well, when I went to high school, I met all these ladies and gentlemen from the north side. And not that it just happened, but I never gave up my other friends. And so one of the boys I went with, Jimmy Toy, he went away to military school, and then in the summer he was there. And he took me to his home. He had a mansion, a stone mansion with a ballroom all across the top. And he was a nice fellow. He died during the war. And so anyhow, in high school, I took my lunch, usually a bologna sandwich and an apple or something. And there were clubs in like sorority, but this was in high school. And they had one called the Philomathians. I don't know what that means, but Philomathians. And then there was another club for women, and then the boys had clubs. Well, Philomathians with all the rich kids. And they asked me to join. I certainly wasn't rich. And I even became president of the club. And then I was a cheerleader. And one of my heartbreaks during high school was I didn't get on the honor society. And I should be on the honor society. But for some reason I wasn't in the honor society. But I did work on our annual, which I still have, our high school annual. I still have it. And I worked interviewing people, putting little things under the names. And then I also belonged to the Spanish club. And our teacher was this beautiful young lady from South Carolina. All the boys were crazy about her. She was so pretty, and with a little southern accent and teaching Spanish. And so I had 2 years of Spanish, and that helped me when we went to South America. And so high school I had, another thing in high school which was very important, we danced all summer. We had a big barn-like place at Stone Park, which was out just on the edge of Sioux City, a big empty building with a little building there that sold Coca-Colas and soft drinks, and a box, what do they call them? You know, that the music came out of.
Jukebox.
Jukebox, with a jukebox. And we danced all summer. And I'd sit on the front porch with my family. That's what we did. We sat on the front porch. We had a swing there and a couple chairs, waiting for boys to call me and asking to take me to the dance. And it happened and it didn't happen. And but we had all summer we spent there, had the best time. And some of the fellows were great dancers. Great dancers. And so you always tend to try to edge your way with one of them. And some didn't, but I'm surprised that so many were such good dancers. So we had a lot of fun doing that. And so growing up, and as I said, we didn't have any money, but I said I had a wonderful time. And the boys, in high school, they could get their father's car on the weekend. So we get transportation out to Stone Park and go dancing. And my mother, we said an expression back there, looks like she just came out of a bandbox. That's one who was dressed beautifully, the hair was beautiful, and that was my mother. And she'd have her hair set once every 2 weeks, and it always looked just beautiful. And then she always wore suits to work. She did just step out of a bandbox. She had that look, and sweet and kind. And she looked after Eileen, her sister. She was the one, her protector. And she would see that on birthdays and anniversaries and Christmas that Eileen was taken care of. She'd go to her brothers and sisters, now be sure and get a nice gift for Eileen. And she was just a good-hearted person.
Yeah.
And so that was high school.
Was she nervous too?
Yeah, she was very nervous, yeah. Too. And then college came, and I thought, well, most of my friends that I had were going to go away to college. Of course, I couldn't go away to college. But there was a Catholic girls' college about a mile from where I lived. So it was on a hill, the top of a hill, and I would walk there, and then there were like 40 to 50 steps going up. And when the nuns taught, they were wonderful, wonderful teachers. And my favorite teacher taught sociology, and I always thought if I could have finished, I would have been a social worker. But at the end of 2 years, I owed him so much money. And my Uncle Morris helped me with the finances at times. And I thought, oh, I have to quit. So I went to work, and I worked for a loan company in Sioux City. And what they do, he had me go into a little room, and somebody come in, want to borrow money, and we take them in this little room and interview them, ask them all sorts of questions, and then take that interview to the boss, and he decide if he'd want to loan the money or not. So I worked there for about a year, and the war started about a year before that, and they built an air base in Sioux City. It was outside of Sioux City, maybe 5 miles or 10 miles. And they used to, the society ladies used to ask the young girls to go on the bus out to the air base and dance with the officers. So I did that 2 or 3 times, and this one time, Everett was there. And he danced with me, and I thought he was nice, and I guess he thought I was nice. And he called me the next morning, and he said, I'd like to take you to the movies or out to dinner. Well, he called me day after day, and we went out. And he was only there probably 2 or 3 months at the most. And then he was transferred to Gowan Field, Idaho. And then he said, oh, I want to marry you. He asked me in Sioux City. And I said, well, there's a big difference in you and me. And he said, well, what's that? And I said, well, I'm Catholic. Your father's a Mason. And it's very important to me. My faith is very important to me. He says, don't worry, not to worry. I won't interfere at all, not at all. And he went to church with me every Sunday. Then he converted when the kids were in elementary school and became a Catholic. And and Jim has done a real good interview with him. And I hope you get to see it, the one that Jim did with his father. So I won't go into all his history. And so when he asked me to marry him in Sioux City, I finally said yes, and then he went out to my home. My grandmother was there and her brothers and sisters to ask for my hand in marriage. And he told them, he said, now I'm going to take care of Margaret Ann. Don't you worry about her. I've got a savings account. I've got $250 in my savings account. So you won't have to worry a bit. And my family loved it. They just loved it. So even though we'd only known each other a few months, they didn't hesitate about giving me their approval. And so went off to Idaho. We went for the wedding, and he had arranged everything. The priest, the chapel, the reception, the hotel. He took flowers. He did everything. My mother and I took the train and just arrived, and there was everything set. So we were married there. And then we were only there about 2 months when he was transferred to Kearney, Nebraska, and then went overseas. He was only in Kearney a couple weeks, and he flew to overseas. And he told me when he asked me to marry him, he said, I'm never going overseas. I'm going to be a trainer here. I'm going to train other pilots. Well, off he went overseas. And he was there 2 years. And I lived, so some of the other wives, 2 other wives and myself decided we would go someplace and work while they were overseas. So and the Crosby's wife and another wife who was from Sioux City and I said, why don't we go to Chicago? I have an uncle in Chicago. That'd be a good place to go. So the 3 of us went to Chicago. We found a nice little apartment, and all of us got jobs. And one of the girls from Sioux City was a roller skater. And she found a partner who was a roller skating, a fellow, and that's what she did. She worked as a roller skater. They'd go into nightclubs and they had a big round plywood, and they'd roller skate on that. And then Jean Crosby, she was a copywriter. Well, I never knew what a copywriter was. I still don't. And I got a job as a receptionist at Owens Corning Fiberglass Company. And it was right downtown Chicago, about a block or two from Marshall Field's, the well-known store. And we had a good time and used the elevator. Nobody had a car. So we used the train and the elevated, they called them, because they're up above. And then the fellows came back, and Ev's first assignment was near Phoenix at a base called Chandler Air Force Base. And we lived in Tempe, which is maybe a few miles from Phoenix. And we first lived in the dormitory of the school, and it was the headmaster's apartment, so it was better than some of the others. And so we were there a year, and Spence was born there in Phoenix. And when he was a couple months old, Ev got orders to go to South Carolina. And in the meantime, he and a friend had bought an airplane, one of the surplus airplanes. And it was a seat in front and a seat in back and all open. So he was transferred. He said, you know, I'm going to fly there. Would you like to go with me? And I said, sure. So I get in this airplane with this fancy little new baby, a few months old. And I can still remember this. And the sun was coming in and I was trying to protect him. So we flew to South Carolina. And we were no sooner there than this program came out, an Air Force program, that if you had 2 years or less to complete your degree, you can go back to college and keep your rank and your salary and everything. So he says, oh, I've got to do that. So we went to Seattle and bought a house, little house. It was a Dutch colonial, and it was near the university. And so Jim was born there. And he was born at a military hospital, a naval hospital, which is now Amazon.com, the same building. And Jim, when I told him, he was so excited, and he went up to see it, and they wouldn't let him in. A lot of security there. And so anyhow, and then we, from Seattle, Eb was sent to the language school in Monterey, California. It's ambassadors, people working in foreign service, military people. That's where they went for a language course. And Eb went for Spanish. He majored in Latin American studies. So he went there for the language course. And he was there, so we moved to Monterey, California. And he just had 6 months there. And we liked it. And I remember the house we had there. We rented a house, and Spence and Jimmy were just little guys. And we went back, and I thought, when I went back years later, I thought, oh, that house had that huge window in front. Well, when we went back, it was just a little window. You know, you visualize things. They're always bigger than what it was. So anyhow, that was nice, and we were in artichoke country there. So Ev used to bring back big boxes of artichokes. Well, I'd never heard of an artichoke, of course. And I learned to cook them, so that was fun. And so then he did not have orders. So he said, well, I'm just going to go to Washington, D.C. We'll all go and get my orders for my next assignment. And we bought our first car, and I can still see that car. It was a maroon Buick. So he had with 2 little kids, so Ev put a piece of plywood over the back seat and up to the front seat, just a big platform with the plywood. And we put the two kids back there. Jim was maybe 6 months, maybe a year, and Spence was 3, I think. And went to Washington, D.C. So he got an assignment after he got there. He was assigned to Cali, Colombia, to work with the Colombian Air Force because of his Spanish and all. So we didn't have, and we knew we were going to get a big house down there, but we didn't have much furniture. So what are we going to do? Oh, we'll go out and buy used furniture and take it down there. So we got some of the most beautiful furniture for practically nothing. And the house down there was amazing. It was built around a patio. The patio was in the middle, and the house was built around it. And it was 2-story. And the wall, there was a big wall, and the top had cracked glass, broken glass. That was to keep the robbers out. They didn't think they'd climb over that, although we never saw any robbers or heard of them with anybody. And that was a wonderful life. I had a cook who came in every day and cooked for us. And then I had another Colombian lady who came in and helped with the house cleaning and helping with the kids, Cordula. And what a life. And so we associated mainly with the other Americans. There were maybe 15 Americans there. We had this wonderful house. And then I had 2 kids down there in the 3 years. Must be not having to do housework or something brings it on. But
You can tell us more.
so David was born first in the hospital there. And there was a doctor that had been trained in the United States. And he looked just like Tyrone Power, a movie star in my time. Handsome, handsome fellow. So we used to call him Tyroncita. And all the women were crazy about it. And so Dave was born, and my mother came down to visit us down there, and Frida, dear friends, Frida and her husband came to visit us there. And our next door neighbors, he was a Pan American pilot, and they had 4 girls, and we had the 4 boys. So later on in life, when I wrote to her and said I had a girl, she said, we're going to try again. They had another girl. So they ended up with 5 girls. And we stayed in touch with them. She's still living in Texas, and he has died. But I still keep in touch with them. I'm good friends. And so let me think here for a minute. That was where we went.
So you had Bobby there too.
Yeah. And that here where we went next.
Do you have enough storage for all that?
What happened after Columbia?
Well, that's where I've got to look here.
You went to San Bernardino.
I think we went to, let's see, the Bootstrap, the language school, Cali, Colombia, 3 years. Oh, then we went to San Bernardino. And we were there a couple years. And that's where Mary was born. Mary was born in San Bernardino. So after San Bernardino, we went to Georgia, Warner Robins, Georgia. And we drove in there, and it's this 1-block town. And I said, oh, Ev, do you think you can get a transfer out of here? And he said, I don't think so. And it turned out we loved it there. Every place we were, we loved. And Barbara was born there. And Barbara was our Georgia peach, as we called her. They're famous for their peaches. So Barbara was our Georgia peach. And the only time anybody broke a bone in the family, Spence broke his arm, roller skating. That's the only broken bone in the whole family forever.
I broke my hand hitting Bobby on the head.
Oh, you did?
I broke Barbara's tooth dumping her in the pool.
So anyhow, I won't go. David's experience happened there, where I went out for a walk with Mary, who in her stroller when we were in San Bernardino, no, in Georgia, and David was about 5, I guess, and he said, or kindergarten, first grade maybe, and he said, "Oh, I don't feel well. Can I stay home from school today?" And I said, "Yes, you can." So I took Mary out for a walk in the stroller, and something told me, "You should go home. You should get on home." I don't know, a voice from heaven. So I went home, and I said, "David, where's David?" I looked under the beds, I looked every closet, he was hiding. I thought, where is he? And then, maybe 5 minutes or so later, I heard this little voice, "Let me out, let me out." He was in the refrigerator with the door closed and couldn't open the door. And the reason we had that like that, because when we lived in Georgia, we had 2 houses, duplex. We had them both, and they cut a door in between the 2 sides, so we ended up with 2 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 2 kitchens, and I didn't use the 1 kitchen with the refrigerator. So anyhow, I thank you God, that I got home, because that wasn't very good, and that was one of the big things that happened down there.
What was it like having 6 kids at this point?
Well, to me, it was just do what you had to do. And Ed was a wonderful father. And off and on I had help. And I just took it in stride, I guess you'd say. And it wasn't as bad as some people think. I said, well, they didn't all come at once. It was just one at a time. And so anyhow, we were there.
Philippines.
Let's see, huh?
Then you went to the Philippines.
After
the next-
Georgia.
Then, here, let's see, that was Georgia. And from there, we went to the Philippines. And we were in the Philippines for 3 years. And we had, that picture was taken, I love my favorite picture there, it was taken in the Philippines. And we had a wonderful house that was right next to the parade grounds, with a porch on 2 sides of the house. And I always thought the dining room was like a bowling alley, and the bedrooms were all around that. And we had an air conditioner in 2 bedrooms, I think. It's very hot and very humid in the Philippines. The people are wonderful. We had a gardener, Ignacio, who was about 18 at the time, and he came to Ed once and he said, "I have a friend in the American Navy. Do you think you could get me in?" And Ed said, "Well, I'll try." And he wrote a wonderful, glowing letter about Ignacio to the Navy, and he was accepted. And he went up, he got in the Navy, he went up and up and up, and he has now a beautiful home in San Diego. His 2 daughters had big, lovely weddings, and he's been very successful. And after he retired from the Navy, after he did that, he worked for civil service doing the same job. And his job was going all over the world to the boats that had problems, some kind of problem, and he'd fly there and find out what it was, what it needed, the parts that were needed, and he'd get those parts. That's what he did. And of course he had contacts all over. And now we see him every once in a while, Ignacio, and always hear from him at Christmas. And then I had a cook there, full-time cook, who came in every day, and a maid. So that was very nice, that with the 6 kids. Very nice. And we lived there 3 years. And one thing that happened there, Bobby set the parade grounds on fire.
Tell us about it.
Well, he just was playing around with matches, and it started, and they saw it and put it out. But they weren't too happy about it. But that was an experience there. And
Then you moved to South Bend.
then we, from the Philippines, and I have to tell you, we went to the Philippines on a Navy boat. And it took 21 days to get from San Francisco to Manila. And so David probably remembers, we had a wonderful time. You know, all our meals were served to us, and they had 21 days just to play around and have fun.
Like
And
a
I
cruise
thought it
ship.
was a great vacation. And I remember you kids, I think that's when I taught you bridge. And I remember Bobby playing, what's the word?
Chess.
Chess. Bobby learned how to play chess. And I don't know if the others did. So anyhow, we passed the equator and they, went out in costume. That was a big party. So that was nice. Then when we left there, we flew from Manila to Hawaii to San Francisco. And then from there we went to Notre Dame. And of course that was a choice assignment. And we bought a house. I still remember that house. We paid $17,000 for it. It had 4 bedrooms, small. The main bedroom was a little bigger than that. But Spence and Jim had one room. Bob and David had another. Mary and Barbara had a bedroom, and then Ev and I. And then when my mother came, and she was living with us for a while, I put Barbara in a baby bed. She was about 5 then, but little. She was always little. So I put her in a baby bed in our bedroom, and then my mother took her bedroom, her bunk bed. So you always manage. I think my theory is whatever problem exists, there's an answer. You just have to find the answer. And I have found that throughout life that has helped a lot. And I'm an optimist. I think everything's going to turn out just fine. We'll solve this problem and everything will turn out fine, which it has. And so in Notre Dame, we were there. We liked it so well. Ev asked to stay longer. So we stayed there 5 years, the longest we'd been any place, because we loved it there. We went to all the football games. And in the winter, it'd be freezing, and Ev would bring hot toddies with it. So people around us would say, "Oh, look at what they're..." So we went, no matter how, heat or cold, we went to the games. And Father Hesburgh, who was the head of the university, was a very famous man. He went to the White House often and was included in a lot of discussions. And Father, he was a friend of ours.
Which president was that?
Huh?
Which president?
Well, I
All
think
of them.
maybe,
All of them.
Oh,
well, those years were the 60s. It'd be Kennedy, would it? And all the presidents that came along, they always called him to the White House and for discussions and so forth. That was nice. And they had a nice theater there that the students who were in theatrics, drama, put on plays, and we always went to those. That was nice. They had other guests come, and we lived maybe a mile or so, and in the housing area where we lived, there was a swimming pool. Well, that was wonderful. The summer, the kids, it was free, would go over to the swimming pool. And I remember Barbara was real little, about 5, and she'd go over there, and I'd tell the other kids to watch her. And I know somebody came up to me one day and said, "You let her go over there by herself?" I said, "Well, sure." Well, they couldn't understand that, but I never worried about her. The other kids were there. And So that I remember about South Bend too. It's a nice town. Cold, cold, cold in the winter, hot in the summer, like Sioux City. And so the kids went to high school there and elementary school. And I remember David telling me, oh, it was a long walk to elementary school. Well, when we went back, it was about 2 blocks.
More.
And so anyhow, they went to all through the kids. Jim and Spence graduated there from high school, and then Spence started Notre Dame as a freshman, and he spent his first year there, and then the second year, he just didn't think it was the place for him. It just didn't fit with him. So he enlisted in the Air Force, and he spent 4 years in the Air Force, couple years in Thailand. He loved Thailand. And he went in and they said, they test everybody, give them these tests for what they're good at. And it said that the test came out saying he was good at electronics. He says, I never knew that. We said, we never knew that. So he had 4 years of electronic training. And he also took correspondence courses in electronics. Then when he came back, he went to the Northrop School of Electronics. He went to that for a year, I think. So he didn't get a college degree, but he had a lot of knowledge. And he's 70 now and still working. So he must be pretty good. At 70, they're still hiring him and wanting him to come to them. So anyhow, that was Notre Dame. And after his job there, he was head of the ROTC, Air Force ROTC at Notre Dame. He was the head. They also had the Navy there. The Navy and the Air Force and the Army. And they all had heads, like Ed was of the Air Force. And let's see, Jim stayed at Notre Dame. He stayed there, and he finished and graduated from there, and then went to medical school. Nobody had any money. I don't know, Eb, when the kids were all in high school, he'd say, how are we going to get these kids through college? I'm really concerned about that. I say, don't worry, they will, they'll do it, don't worry. And they all did. And so then we went from there. Jim stayed and Spence stayed, and the rest of the 4 other kids, we went to Europe. And we were stationed in France for about 1.5 years. And we had a little house in France, and it was near Nancy, France. And it was wonderful being there, going by the bakery and getting the French bread and going out to eat, and everything was always delicious there. And David went to high school there, and Bob too, I guess, went away to high school. And did you come home on the weekends? Came home on the weekends, and they learned a little French. And one summer they went to a French school for a couple months. I don't think they ever learned much French, but they had a good time. And they used to go to then we were there, and President de Gaulle sent all the Americans out. Through all the Americans, he didn't want them there, military. So we were sent to Germany, and we spent a couple years there, and we had an apartment on the base, and the boys roomed together, and the girls, and I know the boys used to go over to the little German bars and had a little good time. And let's see, what else about Europe? Of course, we were in an area that was interesting and beautiful. We went to Berchtesgaden while we were there, which is a ski area, and they all went skiing, and we'd spend a week there. Beautiful. And then Ev and I took trips to England and Spain and France, and we took, often we would go together, and then we'd come back and we'd take all the kids on the next one. And we went to, the family went to Spain, stayed right on the beach and had a wonderful time. You should interview the kids for some of this. And we went to Paris, and we went to Italy. Ev and I went once without them and once with them. We had some wonderful trips. And that was, I felt so fortunate that we could do that. Now I have to go back one thing. When his time was up in the Air Force and we were in Phoenix area, I had Spence. And he came to the hospital and I was there, just had Spence. And he said, you know, I have to make up my mind one way or the other. He said, should I stay in the Air Force or should I get out? And I think I could get a job with my Uncle Dewey in Modesto, California. He has an oil company. What do you think? What should I do? And I said, gee, you love flying, and I love to travel and see things in the world. I think you ought to stay in. And he says, great, that's what I'd like to do too. That's why I stayed in the Air Force for 28 years. So, that's just a little side thing. And so we had a good time over there and saw a lot, took advantage of where we were and where we could go. And then that's when he retired, at the end of that assignment, that he was out. That was 28 years later. And Jim tell you about all his experience in the war. But he said, so he said, well, I have a cousin in Burbank who's the comptroller at Lockheed. Maybe I could get a job there. So he contacted his cousin, and his cousin said, sure, come on out, and we'll see that you get a job. So we went from Europe to Los Angeles. We lived in Northridge. And he got a job as in the buying department, where he would buy parts for the airplanes, things they needed he would buy and supply and something. And so then he worked there for 11 years. And one period there, they were laying off a lot of people. Lockheed and some of the other companies were laying off people. And he came home from, he went from Northridge to Burbank every day. He was working. And one day he came home and he said, well, it finally happened. And I said, what? He said, I had an accident on the freeway. I said, thank God, I thought you'd been fired. Oh gosh, so in Northridge, we spent 20 years in Northridge, and Mary and Barbara, and they finished school, and then they all started off to college. Jim already was in, and then Spence in the Air Force, and David went a year down there, and then he came up here and fell in love with San Luis Obispo and finished his degree here. And then he went into teaching, and he was always voted the most popular teacher. They loved, he was a great teacher. And then he became a politician, and became a supervisor, which is a top job in the city government. And he was elected twice. And then afterwards, he worked at the college for a time. And now he's been here, and he encouraged us. Ev and I were then in Northridge. And he said, why don't you come up here? Why don't you come up here? And I said, it's too cold up there. And he said, and then the traffic got to us. And so we said, well, we've got to go someplace. And we always thought we might go to San Diego or Santa Barbara or something. And I said, well, let's go to San Luis Obispo. So we came up here and looked for housing. And even back then, housing was expensive. I was surprised. We thought, oh, we're going to get a bargain up in that little town. But we didn't. And so David, I told David one time, he had sent us out here to this area to look at. And so we found this lot here while we were looking. We'd been looking at used housing and then this new area out here. And it was beautiful. I stood here in the lot and I looked at that mountain. I said, I love this. I just love this. And Ev said, well, I like it too. And so Dave said, well, if you buy the lot, I'll see that you get a house built. And I've got a lot of friends in the business, and then we'll build you a house. So they built this house for us. And so that was, I said to Barbara once, I said, well, one of the best things we ever did was buy that lot and build a house in San Luis Obispo. And she said, better than having us? I said, well, I'll have to think a minute about that. So there we were, and here we are, and we've been here for almost 30 years. I can't believe it. We've been here in San Luis almost 30 years. And David and Naomi have been our protectors, and there when we needed them. And otherwise, it wouldn't have been as great if I didn't have any family here at all. It was wonderful being close to them. And so what else? Well, I think then we sold our house to David and Naomi. And so it's close, and I come here and I see familiar things, which is so nice that I would have had to throw away, give away, or something, like that card table there that Ev made when he was just a little kid. And I see like the buffet I knew bought in Germany, and other things I see that are still familiar, and it's nice to see that. And then it's nice, it's wonderful that Mary and Frank have moved here about 1.5 years ago. And it's so nice having them close by too. Have I left anything out?
What would you like everybody to know?
To know. Well, I guess that I've survived this long, and I don't know why, because I never worried about what I ate, that it had to be special, or I didn't exercise, but I've always had a kind of a positive, would you say I had a positive attitude? And I'm so fortunate, I'm blessed, truly blessed, that I have 6 wonderful children. They all became very successful, all of them. And they all found the right person to marry. And then my grandchildren, I have 11 terrific grandchildren, and 9 boys and 2 girls. And they're all wonderful kids. There's not a one that you could say is a bad person, or he's been in jail, or, they're just all terrific people. And I'm really blessed with that many children and grandchildren, and now great-great-grandchildren. to have them all such super people, loving people, kind people. You know, what more could I have asked for? And
Well, we love you. What advice do you have for us?
well, one piece of advice I have is always tell your beloved, your husband, your wife, whatever, that you love them. Now, I wish that with Everett, I had told him more often, and I regret that. He was more affectionate than I was, and he would kiss me and say, oh, the best thing I ever did in my life was marry you. But I was not as outgoing as he was, and now I regret that. So anybody you're involved with, your wife, your children, be sure and tell them every day, I love you. It only takes a minute, and I wish I had done that with them. And what other advice? Well, gosh, I don't know, just live being kind to people. All of you, I wish that you're all kind to others, and yeah, that's very important. And not be negative about another person's faith, or their their life, what they're doing. Not to be negative, particularly about their faith, because we're all different faiths in this family, and always be positive about it, and not be, and have prejudices, not have prejudice against gays or blacks or any of those people. I used to tell the kids, and I hope they got the message, that they weren't any better than anybody else. They're all equal. Did I ever get that message to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Plus, you don't like us to talk about politics.
oh, yeah. One of my no-nos is, in the reunions, never talk politics or religion. Those are two things to stay away from, because there have been so many cases where it breaks up families. And friends, it's broken up friends and family, and I just want us all to love one another, and it ends up in an argument, and no one ever convinces the other one anyhow. So I say, please don't talk politics or religion. Let's just love one another and have a good time.
Did Kent want to know something?
So, you had mentioned your grandmother when you were younger, how much she was like the matriarch.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you've taken on that role in the family, and has she been your model? Was she your model for what that looks like?
Well, maybe it's internal. Maybe it's something within me. I don't know. I never felt that way. But it may be something I follow, and maybe I got that from her.
Okay.
I hope so.
What do you remember about the beagle you had in South Bend? Do you remember Pets?
Oh yes, the beagle. Yeah, that's a cute story. Well, we had this beagle, and we had a leather coffee table from South America's, and it had a kind of an apron around it. And for weeks I'd go in the living room, and there'd be these little brown spots. What is that on the floor? And I'd pick them up, and then eventually I found out the dog had been eating the coffee table. And one day, when the kids were all at school, the dog went out in the street. It was hit by a car and killed. So I called Eb and I say, Eb, you gotta come home. Our dog was hit by a car and he's gone. And so Eb came home and I said, how are we gonna tell the kids? How can we tell them their dog is gone? And just within the time they left school, come home. So I said, oh, remember this dog had a sister or brother that's just like him? Why, Ev, why don't you go get that dog, looks just like our dog, and bring it home and we won't tell the kids. So he did. And so he brought the dog home and they thought it was their dog. So we never mentioned the other one. Except one day, one of the kids, I don't know if it was you or Jim or who, said, you know, that dog walks funny. Is that our dog? Because the dog walked funny, because, you know, they put them on a wire thing that they kind of stay on, and so they have a funny walk, and that's what he noticed. And so, well, I said, I guess we better tell him the truth. So that was just one of the little funny stories.
Did you guys have pets?
We
throughout-
had, well, when they were little, we had a lot of cats. And they'd come and go, and all kinds of cats, it seems to me. And so, one cat we had, we called it that damn cat. They said, what's the cat's name? And I said, that damn cat, that's his name. And when he's in, he wants out, and when he's out, he wants in, and that goes on and on. And I used to have David, we had so many cats, I asked David if he'd take some up there and give them away up where he was here. And so he did. And one time I know Barbara told me that she was at a party up here. And she saw that calico cat or some kind of a cat. She said, oh, we had a cat just like that. And he said, that's your cat. Yeah, so we had cats. And then we had a lot. Barbara got, when everybody went off to school and all, she got kind of lonesome. And she said, can I get a dog? And I said, of course you can get one. So she got the Weimaraner. It was just a baby. And so we had a wonderful dog. And she used to
Mandy.
take him, she loved that dog. And what was I going to say about it?
Dad.
So she would go to shows with the dog, and then the dog had 11 babies. And so Ev, in the garage, he built a little with a little fenced wall thing around it in the middle of the garage floor. And we put all the babies in there. And then we put chairs around it. And the neighbor kids and all would come over and watch the little babies. So it was a wonderful dog. And then we had Joey. Joey was a Schnauzer. Great dog. Great dog. And that's when Ev was ill at the end. He always loved that dog. Joey. And then when Ev had Alzheimer's the last couple years, Ben came, but when he came and we interviewed him, I said, well, what's your name? And he said, Joey. And I said, oh, that's our dog's name. We can't, that would really confuse Ev. And I said, well, what's your first name really? And he said, Benjamin. And I said, okay, you're Ben. You're Ben from now on. And he was. And he stayed with us two years. And terrific Filipino fellow. And he called me Mom.
Do you remember getting in a car accident on your way back from dinner one night in Germany?
Yeah. We had a station wagon then that we took over there. And I think there were 3 couples, and we decided, we were about 30 miles from the border with France. And we decided we'd go over to France and have dinner at this special place. And when we got to the town, we were in an accident, and the police came, and they took us to the station, and all sorts of rigmarole, and we couldn't drive our car back, so Ev called the base, and he said, can you come and pick us up? And the fellow that was hit, I don't know whose fault it was, was a little upset about it all. So anyhow, they came from the air base and picked us up and took us back. And I don't know how we got the car back and had it repaired and all, but we did. That was way bad. You know, but it was fun. It was just another experience we had.
What about with the kids in their teenage years? Were they
Oh,
rebellious?
the teenage years, yeah. Well, Mary, I remember went with some fellow in a band or something. You remember that, Mary? And we weren't too happy about that, and we kept checking on them and all, and where they were and all. And then David would, when Ev and I would go to Modesto to visit his father, who was in his 90s, we'd leave the kids at home, thinking, well, you know, the older ones could do well taking care of the other ones and staying there alone. And then the neighbor, when we got back from one trip, she says, I've got to tell you, they had a big party while you were gone. Oh, they did? Oh, and well, that was David. I think David conspired to have that. And I guess they had a lot of fun, and we didn't know it. I guess it was better we didn't know it.
How about Bobby?
But Bob, they as teenagers, David, I remember him going out working, shoveling snow and cutting grass, and Bobby had his best friend Louie that he hung out with, and Barbara had some girls, and Mary had friends in high school that she hung out with. And she and Barbara didn't get along in high school, but now they're good friends. And the boys all got along pretty well.
No, but isn't there a story about Bobby growing something in the backyard?
Or he got arrested in Mexico?
Bobby.
Oh, well, he ran away once. He and Louie ran away. And they got about 2 miles out of town, I guess. And I forget if they called or somebody picked them up there and called us, I guess. I don't know where they were going, but they decided they were going to run away on their bicycles. And he's still friends with Louie. When he was a neighbor, lived in the back part of the yard. And he and Louie are still good friends. But, you know, it was typical high school. That was before marijuana and drugs and concerts. That was before all that. You know, that happened in the 60s, started in the 60s. So for fun, they used to, I don't know exactly what they did.
Probably better that way.
Yeah. But they stayed out of trouble, more or less. Can you think of anything else?
Did Grandpa always have a workshop?
Yes. Even in South Bend, well, no, he didn't in Germany, no, in France, he didn't have one there. But in South Bend, we didn't have a garage. We had just the overhang there where we parked the car. But there was a little room there, and he did have his workshop in there. And of course, he loved to fish beyond anything. He was a lover of fishing. And yeah, he was really accomplished. He could take flowers. I'd say, if somebody's coming for dinner, can you make something for the dining room table? He'd go out and find some weeds or anything and make a real pretty center decoration. And then he made all those wooden things, you know, and he loved doing that. He made hundreds and hundreds of those birds. And when your father, Dave's father, was running for supervisor, we took the birds, and when we visited people, we would give them a bird that Eb made. So people still come up to me and they said, still got one of your birds. No, but I think he was artistic, and I think if he'd had the training, I think he could have been a sculptor or something, if he'd had the training, because he's very good with his hands.
He liked to garden too, didn't
And
he?
garden, he loved always, even in Germany, when we were in an apartment, behind the apartment was a yard, and he dug up part of it and put in vegetables. He just had to do that. That was in his blood.
Got a good joke for us?
Well, let's see if I can think of a new one. See, if I'd known you were going to ask me that, I would have found one.
Well, tell us one of your favorite ones, because you're a good joke
Oh
teller.
gosh, yeah. So, well, I think my favorite one is the one you all heard about, the woman and the man who lived in a retirement home. They used to play cards together, and one day he said to her, "You know, no one here knows how old I am." And she said, "Oh, is that right?" He said, "Yeah, I haven't told them. I haven't told anybody here. No one knows." She said, "Well, I know. I know how old you are." He says, "No, you don't. No, you don't. Let's put a bet on this." She says, "Okay." He said, "How old am I?" She said, "You're 89. And he was taken back. He said, "How did you know that?" And she said, "I told you yesterday." You told me yesterday. You told me yesterday. But there's a lot of them. And I get that from my Uncle Boris, who was a joke teller. I got some of his genes, I think, because I loved it. And when Ed worked at Lockheed, he used to bring home jokes from Lockheed. They were always funny.
What's
And
your
then-
favorite food?
Huh?
What's your favorite food?
Oh gosh. Well, I love Chipino and prime rib, and I love Mexican food when it's good. It's hard to find good Mexican food, very hard. And I like Japanese. I love tempura. I love that.
Do you remember cooking for the kids?
Oh yeah. And I used to cook things they liked, so I didn't have a lot of problems. You think so?
I love your cooking.
And I think I was a good cook, and I wanted to be tasteful, so we'd have pot roast, things they like, pot roast, spaghetti,
Fish sticks.
fried rice,
Fish sticks.
hot dogs. And where, the first hamburger stand was in San Bernardino, where we lived. And every once in a while, I'd take the kids over there for, when Ed was gone, for hamburgers.
First McDonald's.
The first McDonald's was there.
Mm.
Of course, you know what happened to that. But that was a treat for me. Oh, gee, I don't have to cook. Come on, kids, let's go to McDonald's. But and as I said, I tried to cook things they liked. And a salad, I always had a green salad. And I remember Barbara told me once, she said, well, one time I didn't like the salad and I wasn't going to eat it. And I said, now you're going to sit there until you eat that salad. So she sat there a long time. And I don't remember the ending. I don't know if she ever got away with not eating or what. But they weren't too finicky about it. But I love good cooking. I love good food. It's a special treat for me to go out for good food or go to somebody's home for good food. Special treat for me. It's important to me. And I love politics. I got that from my grandmother. Even when I was little, we had a magazine that was like Newsweek today, And we had one of those with all the news in every week, and the newspaper came every day. And I got really involved in that, although I would never participated in politics, but I read about it, I kept up with it. And I like to listen to and see and read about two sides. I like to read about two sides. Instead of saying, well, somebody preached to the choir. Have you heard that expression? So I like two sides. To learn about them.
What was the most difficult thing about being a parent?
Well, the most difficult is just raising the hope they turn out to be good people. And they did.
How do you like being a grandma?
Well, I love being a grandma because I have great grandchildren. It's really a delight. And great grandma now. I have some really cute little great grandkids. And I'm with two of them now, little Ella and Everett. Now, who names their kids Everett these days? Nobody. So he'll be unique. They'll all know whoever it is. It isn't like another John or another Tom or another Bill. It's Everett.
Sounds like you've had a good life, Mom.
I have had a good life. And my faith is important to me. You know, there are a lot of bad apples in it, but there are 30 million Catholics, so there's bound to be some bad apples there. So that hasn't made my belief any less, because they're the people, they're individuals, human beings who have gone bad, but it doesn't affect the basic belief. And in our church, which is full now, Mary knows, so it hasn't changed the faith of a lot of us, although it could with some people, the bad things that have been done, which were a disgrace.
But most people have some bad memories. You have almost all good memories.
Well, I have good reason to have good memory.
I think the worst memory was being late on that book, or losing that book.
Yeah, that was pretty
It was
sad.
like your trauma.
Yeah. Oh, but I had a good life on the whole. I certainly had a good life. And a lot of things happen that are just luck. You know, it isn't what you did, it was just kind of your lucky day. Like people having certain diseases, like cancer or something. That's luck. Some people, I think it's luck that you don't have it. There's not any reason why this person has it and why you don't, except smoking, of course, is something that leads to it. But, and having a positive attitude too is important. That you can overcome, you know.